We almost built a world of silent aircraft and eternal engines. The future of propulsion was nearly rewritten by 28 forgotten prototypes, machines of stunning genius that somehow vanished from history. By the end of this journey, you will know the secret stories of the inventions that nearly changed everything. Why did a car that ran on water disappear overnight? What was the real purpose of a top-secret Nazi device shaped like a giant bell? This is not just a tour of obsolete blueprints. It is a search for the lost keys to our technological destiny, hidden in the workshop graveyards of the past. What forgotten dream from another time do you wish had become our reality? That single gallon of gasoline held a tantalizing promise. In the grip of the Great Depression, a Canadian mechanic named Charles Nelson Pogg presented a solution that seemed to defy the very logic of scarcity. His invention was not some complex engine replacement, but a simple modification, a new kind of carburetor. The principle was deceptively straightforward. A standard carburetor mixes air and liquid fuel. Pogg's design aimed to transform that liquid into an incredibly fine, dry vapor before it ever reached the combustion chamber. He achieved this through a series of heated chambers and internal wicks, reportedly creating a fuel mist so perfect it would burn with near total efficiency. Imagine the implications for a world where every drop of fuel counted. A car that could travel from New York to Washington, D.C. on a single gallon was not just a convenience, it was a revolution. And for a brief, shining moment, it appeared to be real. Newspapers carried sensational reports. Witnesses swore they saw demonstrations where a car equipped with the Pogg carburetor achieved over 200 miles per gallon. The public was captivated. Then, almost as quickly as it appeared, the miracle vanished. The prototypes disappeared, the patents were acquired and shelved, and Charles Pogg faded into obscurity. The official story cited exaggerated claims and engineering flaws. The whispers, however, spoke of something darker, a deliberate suppression by oil and automotive interests that could not afford such efficiency. Modern analysis suggests the truth lies somewhere in between. While supervaporization does improve combustion, the astronomical mileage figures were likely overstated. Yet the legend endures, a powerful symbol of a road not taken. What if that technology had been refined and embraced? Our entire century-long reliance on cheap oil might have unfolded differently. The ghost of Pogg's carburetor forces us to ask what other simple, elegant solutions have been lost to the shadows of power and profit. This pattern of disappearance was not unique. It would soon manifest in a far more ambitious and chilling project, one born not in a humble garage, but in the secret laboratories of Nazi Germany. Deep within a converted mine in Nazi-occupied Poland, a team of scientists toiled on a project that would make Pogg's carburetor seem like child's play. Their creation was known only as Die Glock, the bell. It was a monstrous bell-shaped apparatus, reportedly constructed from a heavy, hardened metal and standing as tall as a man. Inside this strange vessel, the real mystery unfolded. Researchers would fill it with a curious substance referred to as Zerum 525, a viscous, mercury-like liquid that was stored in lead-lined flasks. The bell was then set into a furious spin. The goal was not merely rotation, but the creation of an immense vortex of force. When activated, the device was said to emit a pale, bluish light and generate an intense humming. The effects on its immediate surroundings were horrifyingly immediate. Vegetation within a certain radius would not just die, it would vitrify, turning into a crystalline, glass-like powder. The liquid Zerum 525 would separate into strange, layered substances, and the scientists involved paid a terrible price. At least 7 are said to have died during the experiments, their bodies succumbing to rapid coagulation of their blood and the grotesque formation of fungal growths within their tissues. This was not mere engine research. This was a desperate, reckless plunge into physics that seemed to border on the supernatural. The Bell was not designed for a car or a plane in any conventional sense. The leading theory among historians is that it was an attempt to manipulate gravity itself, to create a propulsion force that operated on principles we still do not fully understand today. If such a device were even partially successful, it could have given the Nazis a weapon of unimaginable power, a craft that could defy known aerodynamics. The entire facility was dismantled as the war ended, the Bell vanished, and its chief scientist disappeared without a trace. We are left only with fragments of testimonies and a chilling question. Were they merely meddling with lethal centrifugal forces, or did they stumble upon something far deeper, a fundamental force of nature that we have yet to rediscover? The silence from that Polish mine is as profound as the void of space it may have sought to conquer. From the chilling silence of a Nazi superweapon, we leap forward to a sun-drenched American military field in the 1950s. Here, the future of warfare looked less like a terrifying bell and more like a man casually defying gravity. A soldier steps onto a small, round platform, and with a rising whine from twin propellers hidden beneath a mesh grille, he lifts effortlessly into the air. This was the Hiller VZ-1 Pawnee, a personal flying machine that seemed ripped from the pages of science fiction. Its genius lay in a clever application of a simple physical principle, the Conda effect. You can see this yourself by holding the back of a spoon under a running tap, watching the water flow over the curved surface instead of falling straight down. The Pawnee used this same idea. Its 2 counter-rotating fans pulled air in from above and forced it downward, where the curved duct made the airstream cling to its surface, creating a stable, cushion-like column of lift. Control was as intuitive as walking. To move forward, the pilot simply leaned in that direction. To go backward, he leaned back. It was reportedly so easy to fly that test pilots mastered it in minutes, a stark contrast to the complex controls of a helicopter. The vision was revolutionary, a single infantryman who could soar over walls, cross rivers, and scout enemy positions from a whole new perspective. So why did this incredible machine never see battle? The dream of personal flight crashed into the hard realities of physics and warfare. The Pawnee was painfully slow, a floating target in any combat zone. Its range was severely limited by the technology of the era, and it was dangerously vulnerable to even small arms fire. While helicopters were also slow and vulnerable, they could at least carry more men and equipment, offering a better return on the risk. The military reluctantly shelved the project, and the flying platform faded into obscurity. Yet, the ghost of the Pawnee never truly left us. Its core principles of ducted fans and intuitive weight-shift control are the direct ancestors of the vertical takeoff and landing drones we see today. It makes you wonder, if battery technology had been more advanced back then, would our skies now be filled with commuters standing on platforms, leaning into their morning commute? This was a future that was almost within our grasp, a future where the sky belonged to everyone. But what if the key to the stars was not a platform, but a silent, wingless craft that moved without any visible propulsion at all? For decades, Paul Moller offered a tangible dream, a gleaming red vehicle parked not in a garage but on a rooftop, ready to carry you over the traffic below. This was the Moller Skycar M400, the culmination of a lifelong vision to make the flying car a reality for the average person. Unlike the simple platform of the Hiller Pawnee, the Skycar was a sophisticated machine, a volunteer designed for true point-to-point travel. Its sleek body was lifted not by wings, but by 8 powerful, computer-controlled ducted fans. These fans would pivot to lift the vehicle straight up like a helicopter, then tilt forward to propel it like an airplane, all while the pilot simply input a destination. The promise was a vehicle as easy to operate as driving a car, a true personal aircraft for the masses. Moller staged stunning public demonstrations where the Skycar would rise, hover, and maneuver with an almost magical grace, a silent promise of a future just within reach. So why is your garage still empty? The dream of the Skycar crashed into a wall of relentless reality. The mechanical complexity was staggering, with multiple rotary engines that needed to work in perfect, flawless harmony. A single failure in one of the 8 lift fans could be catastrophic. The vehicle was notoriously loud, consumed fuel at an alarming rate, and faced a regulatory no man's land. Where would these things fly? Who would be allowed to pilot them? How would we prevent the skies from becoming a chaotic, high-speed collision course? Despite decades of work and millions of dollars invested, the Skycar never progressed beyond the prototype stage, forever trapped in a cycle of demonstrations and new funding rounds. It stands as a heartbreaking monument to the chasm between a beautiful idea and a practical product. We are left to wonder if the failure was with the machine itself, or with our own world's inability to accommodate such a radical change. What would it truly take to build a sky that could hold 1 million individual dreams of flight? Perhaps the answer lies not in complex machinery, but in a return to a principle of breathtaking simplicity, one written in the very flow of water and air. The flying saucer, that iconic shape of alien visitation, was once a serious blueprint in a secret American hangar. At the height of the Cold War, the United States Air Force pursued its own unidentified flying object, not from another world, but from the drawing boards of companies like Avro and Convair. This was the Lenticular Reentry vehicle, a wide, disc-shaped craft that looked like a silver saucer from a science fiction magazine. Its design was a radical departure from the slender cones of traditional capsules. The lenticular shape was chosen for a critical advantage, maneuverability. While a standard ballistic missile follows a predictable arc, a flying disc could theoretically glide and steer during its fiery plunge back through the atmosphere. This meant it could change its landing site, evade enemy defenses, and perform precise reconnaissance or even nuclear strikes with a level of control that was otherwise impossible. Imagine the strategic value of a spacecraft that could re-enter over the Pacific, then bank north to deploy its payload over a target thousands of miles away from its original trajectory. It was an attempt to merge the unstoppable force of an intercontinental ballistic missile with the graceful, controlled flight of an aircraft. Yet for all its promise, the saucer never left the atmosphere. The dreams of engineers crashed into the hard limits of 1960s technology. The materials needed to withstand the incredible heat and stress of a maneuverable re-entry were still years away. The complex control systems required to stabilize such an unconventional shape in the chaos of hypersonic flight were beyond the era's computers. Faced with these immense hurdles, the military chose the known path, pouring resources into more conventional ballistic missiles and eventually the space shuttle. The lenticular re-entry vehicle was quietly shelved, its files classified and forgotten. Its legacy is a profound what-if. For a brief moment, the future of space travel looked not like a rocket, but like a silver disk sailing silently through the upper atmosphere. What other celestial dreams have we abandoned simply because they arrived too early? Sometimes the most advanced idea is not the one that wins, but the one that waits for the world to catch up. This pattern of premature genius would find its echo not in the void of space, but in the deep, silent ocean. The sleek, impossibly futuristic lines of the Ford Nucleon looked like a rocket ship designed for the open road. This was the 1950s vision of atomic utopia, a family car with its own miniature nuclear reactor tucked neatly in the trunk. Ford's designers, swept up in the promise of the atomic age, pushed the passenger cabin forward to make room for a centralized power capsule at the rear. The principle was deceptively simple. A core of uranium would undergo fission just like in a power plant, but on a much smaller scale. This reaction would heat water into steam, which would then spin a turbine to drive the wheels. The selling point was range, a staggering 5,000 miles or more on a single charge of nuclear fuel. Imagine pulling into a service station not for gasoline, but to swap out a spent uranium core for a fresh one. It was the ultimate expression of a world convinced that the atom would power everything from our homes to our daily commute. This scale model captivated the public, a gleaming chrome promise of a future without gas stations or exhaust fumes. Yet the Nucleon never progressed beyond that 3/8 scale display. The dream of a nuclear-powered car crashed into realities far more formidable than traffic. The sheer weight of the lead shielding required to protect passengers from radiation would have made the vehicle impossibly heavy. The problem of disposing of spent radioactive fuel after each core swap was never addressed. And then there was the unthinkable scenario of a high-speed collision, transforming a simple fender bender into a potential radiological event. The Nucleon remains a powerful symbol of an era's breathtaking optimism, a time when humanity believed it could shrink a power plant and put it in every driveway. It forces a difficult question. Were these ideas merely naive, or were they glimpses of a path we abandoned too quickly? What would our cities look like today if we had somehow solved the riddle of safe, small-scale atomic power? This audacious concept proves that the road not taken is sometimes the most illuminating of all. While Ford dreamed of atomic cars, another team of engineers was chasing a propulsion system so efficient it seemed to borrow its logic from the stars themselves. A giant winged topward to life over an English field in 1907. This was the Gyropter, the brainchild of inventor Louis Brennan, and it proposed a way to fly that the world would ultimately forget. Unlike any helicopter before or since, its main wings were not fixed to the body. Instead, the entire wing assembly spun around the central fuselage like a coin on its edge, with two large propellers mounted on the wingtips providing both the thrust and the rotation. This bizarre and beautiful machine was a cyclogyro, a concept that trades the single, massive overhead rotor for a circular wing that continuously generates lift from all sides. Brennan was a serious inventor, and he proved the idea worked, building a successful model that achieved stable, controlled flight. So why did this spinning marvel vanish? The sheer mechanical complexity was its first undoing. Imagine the challenge of transferring power from a stationary engine to a constantly rotating wing, all while trying to control the pitch of each blade throughout its cycle to steer the craft. It was a symphony of moving parts where a single failed note could mean disaster. At the same time, pioneers like Igor Sikorsky were perfecting the simpler, more direct approach of the single main rotor and tail rotor, a configuration that was easier to build, control, and understand. The conventional helicopter won the race, and the Gyropter was relegated to a footnote, a curious drawing of a future that never was, yet its ghost lingers. Modern engineers are now revisiting the principles of the cyclogyro for specialized drone applications, where its potential for efficient hovering and unique maneuverability offers new advantages. Brennan's spinning top forces a fascinating question. Did we choose the right path for vertical flight, or was a more elegant solution abandoned simply because it was harder to build? Sometimes the most brilliant ideas are not wrong, they are merely waiting for technology to evolve around them. This theme of a beautiful, complex idea being surpassed by a simpler one would play out again, not in the air but on the open sea, with a boat that promised to fly without ever leaving the water. That strange, donut-shaped craft gliding over the water looked less like a boat and more like a machine from another world. This was the Saunders-Roe SR. N1, the world's first practical hovercraft, a brainchild of the brilliant and eccentric Sir Christopher Cockerell. Its principle was one of beautiful simplicity. A massive fan in the center of the craft blasted air downward, trapping it beneath a flexible rubber skirt. This created a persistent cushion of air, lifting the entire vehicle a few feet above the surface, whether that surface was water, marsh, or solid ground. For military planners, this was a revelation. Here was a machine that could deliver tanks, troops, and supplies directly onto an enemy beach, bypassing heavily defended ports altogether. It promised to render traditional coastal fortifications obsolete, offering a completely new form of amphibious assault. The SR N1 proved the concept worked, and for a time, it seemed the future of naval invasion had arrived. Yet, this revolution never fully materialized. While the hovercraft technology itself was a success, leading to the famous cross-channel ferries, its grand military destiny was snatched away by the helicopter. Helicopters could do everything the hovercraft could, but they could also fly higher, faster, and over longer distances, unconstrained by the sea state or terrain. The hovercraft was left with a crucial but narrower role. It makes you wonder, what if the helicopter had not been perfected at that exact moment? Would our beaches today be patrolled by silent, skimming assault craft instead of thundering rotor blades? The SR N1's story is a lesson in technological timing, where a brilliant idea can be overtaken not by failure, but by a competing vision that arrives at just the right time. This dance between competing ideas would play out again, not on the water, but in the silent, airless vacuum of space, where one engine promised a journey to the stars on nothing more than the power of light itself. While the Americans were perfecting helicopters, Soviet engineers were building a true leviathan of the skies, gliding just feet above the water. A machine the length of a football field cast a terrifying shadow across the Caspian Sea. Western spy satellites first glimpsed this behemoth in the 1960s, and analysts, baffled by its sheer size and strange profile, dubbed it the Caspian Sea Monster. This was not a ship, nor was it a conventional aircraft. It was an ekranoplan, a ground effect vehicle that exploited a simple yet powerful quirk of aerodynamics. As a wing moves very close to a flat surface like the sea, the air beneath it becomes compressed, forming a high-pressure cushion that dramatically boosts lift and reduces drag. The ekranoplan was designed to ride this invisible wave, its giant wings keeping it airborne while it skimmed the waves at nearly 300 miles per hour. This was its genius and its ultimate limitation. It was a prisoner of its own principle of flight, forever tethered to that thin slice of air just above the water's surface. Its military purpose was brutally clear: flying too low for most radar to detect and far too fast for any submarine to track or engage. The ekranoplan could deliver a devastating payload of anti-ship missiles or an entire company of Marines directly onto a hostile shore. It was a terrifying loophole in naval warfare, a craft that ignored the traditional boundaries between sea and air power. So why did these colossal machines end up rusting in forgotten hangars? The collapse of the Soviet Union pulled the financial rug out from under countless ambitious projects, and the ekranoplan was a profoundly specialized tool. It had no purpose on the open battlefield, only in massive oceanic assaults that became a relic of Cold War strategy. Without a global superpower struggle to justify its existence, the monster had no home. Its haunting form makes us question the very categories we assign to vehicles. What is the true potential of a machine that exists in the space between ocean and sky? Perhaps its legacy is not one of failure, but of a path so unique we have yet to find a world that needs it. This Soviet giant challenged the definitions of flight, but another forgotten design sought to challenge the very nature of a propeller itself. The Firebird III did not look like a car you drove to the grocery store. It looked like a machine you would pilot to the moon. General Motors unveiled this staggering vision in 1958, a three-wheeled marvel of titanium and glass that seemed less an automobile and more a jet fighter reluctantly tethered to the pavement. At its heart was a revolutionary power plant, the gas turbine engine. This was not the piston-pounding internal combustion engine of every other car. It was a simpler, smoother machine that burned fuel in a continuous stream to spin a turbine, promising immense power from a compact package. The engine was so versatile it could theoretically run on almost anything combustible, from kerosene to diesel fuel, even peanut oil. This was a car divorced from the geopolitics of gasoline, a vehicle of true energy independence. But the innovation did not stop under the hood. Inside the cockpit, the steering wheel was gone, replaced by a single control stick, the same kind a fighter pilot would use. The car even featured a primitive voice command system and an early guidance system, designed for a future where vehicles would lock into automated electronic highways, driving themselves while their occupants relaxed. This was the ultimate expression of the jet age's influence, a future where the open road would feel like soaring through the sky. So why do we still steer with a wheel? The dream of the turbine car was ultimately grounded by a handful of stubborn, practical flaws. While powerful at high speeds, turbine engines were notoriously thirsty at idle, gulping fuel while sitting at a stoplight. They suffered from turbo lag, a deadly delay between pressing the accelerator and the engine spooling up to power, making merging into traffic a white-knuckle affair. And then there was the heat, with exhaust gases so hot they could melt the asphalt on the road behind it. Faced with these fundamental engineering and economic hurdles, the automotive world chose to refine the piston engine it knew, rather than gamble on the turbine it did not. The Firebird III remains a monument to a different kind of ambition, one that saw the car not just as transportation, but as a personal aircraft for the road. Its story forces a poignant question. Did we choose practicality over wonder, and in doing so, close the door on a more adventurous future for the everyday driver? While America dreamed of jet-powered cars, another team was building an engine with no moving parts at all, one that promised to harness the silent, pure power of magnetism. The Aereon Dynairship posed a radical question. What if an airship did not simply float but truly flew? In the 1960s, the Aereon Corporation envisioned a craft that would merge the buoyant grace of a zeppelin with the dynamic lift of an airplane. Their creation was not a soft, bloated blimp, but a rigid, three-lobed vessel, a shape that looked like three aerodynamic cigars fused together into a single, elegant form. This was a hybrid designed to use helium for its primary lift, but its true genius was in its wings. The entire craft was a wing. As it moved forward, its unique shape would generate enormous additional aerodynamic lift, allowing it to carry immense loads with tiny, fuel-sipping engines. The promise was a new kind of sky freighter, a silent, efficient leviathan that could carry cargo or passengers for thousands of miles on a fraction of the fuel required by a thundering jet. It was the ultimate slow and steady solution for a world not yet obsessed with speed, and the idea proved its worth. Scaled models flew beautifully, demonstrating the stability and lift efficiency the engineers had predicted on paper. The dream was within touching distance, yet no full-scale Dynairship was ever built, the project founded on the sheer scale of investment required. Building a prototype large enough to prove the concept commercially was a monumental financial risk. In an era where aviation progress was measured in supersonic breakthroughs and ever-faster jets, the quiet, methodical promise of the Dynairship seemed like a relic from a bygone age. It was a vision of sustainable, heavy-lift aviation, overlooked because it arrived a few decades too soon. Today, as we desperately search for greener ways to move goods across the planet, companies are once again looking at those old Aereon blueprints. The Dynairship's forgotten path forces a difficult reflection. How many solutions to our current crises are already sitting in the archives, waiting for our priorities to finally align with their quiet wisdom? While the Dynairship dreamed of a slower sky, another inventor was chasing a form of propulsion that required no fuel at all, a silent engine powered by the gentle pressure of sunlight itself. A steel tube frame and a skin of mahogany plywood formed one of NASA's most improbable flying machines. In the vast emptiness of a California dry lake bed, a wingless craft, affectionately nicknamed the Flying Bathtub, bounced and skittered behind a speeding convertible. This was the M2F1, a lifting body. Its design was a radical rejection of conventional aviation wisdom. Instead of relying on wings for lift, the entire fuselage was the wing, its bulbous, aerodynamic shape generating enough upward force to glide. The goal was not atmospheric flight, but a new way to return from space. Engineers envisioned a spacecraft that could re-enter the atmosphere, use its body to maneuver with a freedom no ballistic capsule ever could, and then glide silently to a precise runway landing. That humble plywood prototype, towed by a car down a desert road, proved the concept was not just fantasy. It demonstrated stable, controllable flight without a single wing. That success spawned a series of rocket-powered lifting bodies, heavy steel craft that were dropped from bombers to test high-speed re-entry profiles. These were not graceful flyers. They were often described as piloting a brick, but they proved a spacecraft could land like an airplane without wings. The space shuttle would later incorporate a blended wing body design, but it was a compromise. The pure lifting body, a self-flying fuselage, was never fully embraced. Its path represents a road not taken, a potentially simpler and more robust spacecraft that traded complex, fragile wings for a single, tough, lifting shell. We are left to wonder if that simplicity was the true key to routine space access, a dream that rolled through the desert behind a Pontiac, built of wood and sheer audacity. A full decade before Sikorsky's first successful flight, a machine of intricate beauty and astonishing complexity was already dancing in the skies over Europe. Argentine inventor Raul Pateras Pescara built his Pescara Helicopter No. 3 in the 1920s, a machine that looked less like a modern helicopter and more like a colossal mechanical dragonfly. Its most striking feature was a pair of massive, counter-rotating rotors, 2 sets of 4 blades each, mounted one above the other and spinning in opposite directions. This brilliant arrangement cancelled out the powerful torque that tries to spin a helicopter's body the opposite way of its main rotor. But Pescara's true, lasting genius was hidden in the control system. He gave his machine one of the world's first practical applications of cyclic and collective pitch control. This is the very magic that allows a pilot to command a helicopter to fly forward, backward, or sideways. By subtly changing the angle or pitch of each rotor blade as it spins through its cycle, the pilot can tilt the entire disc of the rotor, pushing the craft in any desired direction. With this system, Pescara's machine achieved what others thought impossible. It set official world records, hovering for minutes on end and flying for over a kilometer in a controlled, steady path. It was a triumphant proof of concept, yet this promising future was not to be. The mechanical labyrinth required to achieve that precise blade control was a masterpiece of clockwork complexity, a forest of swash plates, push rods, and gears that was incredibly difficult to manufacture, maintain, and keep in perfect adjustment. Pescara himself eventually moved on to other ventures, and the aviation world, hungry for a simpler solution, embraced Igor Sikorsky's design. Sikorsky used a single main rotor, whose torque was neatly countered by a small, vertical tail rotor. It was a more straightforward, less mechanically delicate answer to the same problem. Pescara's helicopter, with its elegant but complicated twin rotors, faded into history. Its story is a profound lesson in technological evolution. The best solution does not always win, merely the one that is simplest to build and understand at the right time. We are left to wonder if the helicopter's development might have taken a different, perhaps even more stable and powerful path, had the world chosen to untangle Pescara's beautiful, complex knot. The roar of a small jet engine replaced the gentle hum of the ducted fan, marking a new chapter in the quest for personal flight. In the 1980s, the dream of a soldier soaring over the battlefield took a more aggressive form with the Williams International X-Jet, a machine quickly nicknamed the Flying Pulpit. This was not a backpack with a fiery rocket plume, but a compact, turbojet-powered vertical takeoff and landing platform. A soldier would literally stand within its metal frame, gripping hand controls to manipulate the thrust and direction of the single jet engine mounted just below. The promise was a quantum leap beyond the rocket belt's fleeting 30-second flight. The X-Jet could stay aloft for nearly half an hour, a genuine reconnaissance tool that could lift a single scout high above a ridgeline to peer into enemy territory, or quickly reposition a specialist across a chaotic urban landscape. It performed admirably in tests, a stable and surprisingly capable machine that proved the fundamental concept was sound. Yet, the dream of a jet-powered infantryman was ultimately grounded. The X-Jet was incredibly loud, its shrieking engine announcing its presence to every enemy for miles around. It was a slow, hovering target, completely exposed to any soldier with a rifle. And the cost of building and maintaining such a complex piece of equipment for every squad was simply too high for the practical realities of military procurement. The Flying Pulpit now sits silent in a museum, a stark reminder that the battlefield is a brutally efficient filter for technology. It forces a difficult question: is the dream of individual human flight fundamentally incompatible with the dangers of war? Perhaps the future of the soldier in the sky does not belong to a person standing on a platform, but to a silent, unmanned eye watching from above. Its saucer shape was a deliberate echo of the UFOs haunting the public imagination. The Avro Canada VZ9 Avrocar was not a secret weapon from another world, but a top-secret project born from a collaboration between the United States and Canadian militaries. They envisioned a flying jeep, a disc-shaped vehicle that could take off vertically, hover, and then shoot forward at incredible speeds to whisk soldiers across the battlefield. The principle was a sophisticated evolution of the Condor effect. A massive central turbojet engine spun a large horizontal fan, forcing air downward. This airflow was then channeled to the rim of the saucer, where it was supposed to cling to the curved surface, creating a low-pressure bubble above the craft that would suck it powerfully into the sky. On paper, it was a masterpiece of aerodynamic engineering, a true flying saucer built by human hands. In practice, the Avrocar was a profound and humbling lesson in the gap between theory and reality. The craft did manage to hover, but only just. It would shakily lift about 3 feet off the ground, trapped in a cushion of its own making known as ground effect. The moment it tried to rise higher or move forward with any speed, the elegant physics broke down. The smooth, clinging airflow would violently separate from the disk's edge, causing immediate and uncontrollable rolling and pitching. Test pilots fought a desperate, losing battle against the controls, trying to tame a machine that seemed determined to flip over. Its erratic, wobbling flight path quickly earned it a less than glorious nickname, the Flying Mushroom. After years of struggle and numerous near disasters, the project was finally cancelled in 1961. The Avrocar was not a failure of imagination, but a casualty of its time. The complex stability and control systems needed to manage such an unconventional design were simply beyond the reach of 1950s technology. It was a UFO-shaped dream that crashed headlong into the unyielding laws of physics. What if the same project were attempted today with modern flight computers and materials? Would our digital brains finally be able to impose order on that aerodynamic chaos, or was the flying saucer as a practical vehicle always destined to remain a fantasy? For a few fleeting years in the early 1960s, the future of the American road was not a concept car on a rotating stand, but a bronze coupe parked in a suburban driveway. Chrysler did something no corporation had ever dared, building 50 fully functional turbine cars and lending them to real families as part of a massive public experiment. This was not a fragile prototype, it was a drivable dream. Its heart was a fourth-generation gas turbine engine, a masterpiece of mechanical simplicity. While a conventional piston engine is a complex orchestra of hundreds of parts violently pounding away, the turbine was an elegant whirlwind. It had about 1/5 the moving parts, ran with a silky, vibration-free smoothness, and could guzzle a bizarre cocktail of fuels. Owners famously filled the tank with diesel, kerosene, jet fuel, and in one legendary test, even tequila. The car emitted a distinct, futuristic whine, sounding less like an automobile and more like a jet plane idling at a stoplight. The public was utterly captivated. Families who drove the cars reported an otherworldly driving experience, a quiet, smooth glide into a future that had suddenly arrived. So why did this beloved machine, this tangible piece of tomorrow, vanish completely? The dream was strangled by a trio of cold, hard realities. First, the specter of new government emissions regulations loomed, and the turbine's exhaust, while cleaner in some aspects, produced troublesome levels of nitrogen oxides. Second, the cost of manufacturing the precision-engineered turbines from expensive alloys was prohibitively high for mass production. And finally, the engine's greatest weakness was its thirst at low speeds, gulping fuel in city traffic where most driving occurs. In the end, Chrysler made the heartbreaking decision to reclaim and destroy almost all of the 50 cars, crushing a future that the public had already embraced. The Chrysler Turbine Car stands as a poignant monument to a timeline we almost lived in, a world where our cars whirred instead of roared, and where the local gas station sold a menu of strange and wonderful fuels. It proves that a technology does not need to fail to be forgotten. Sometimes it just needs to be too beautiful for its own complicated world. The VVA-14 was an aircraft that refused to be categorized. Conceived by the brilliant Italian-born Soviet designer Robert Bartini, this monstrous machine was engineered for a singular Cold War purpose: to hunt enemy submarines from a dimension they could not reach. It was not merely an ekranoplan, nor was it just an airplane. It was a hybrid leviathan designed to operate in 3 distinct realms, floating on the water like a boat, skimming the surface in ground effect like a sea monster, and then, astonishingly, ascending to soar through the skies at high altitude like a conventional aircraft. Its most striking features were the two colossal inflatable pontoons running along its fuselage. These were not just for buoyancy, they were central to its lift, acting as the lower part of its enormous wings when filled with air. The operational vision was breathtaking. The VVA-14 would take off from the choppy sea, climb to a cruising altitude to cover vast oceanic distances quickly, then descend to skim just meters above the waves, its airframe riding the ground effect cushion for maximum efficiency. At this perfect hunting altitude, it would deploy its magnetic anomaly detector, a sensitive instrument that could sense the subtle distortion in Earth's magnetic field caused by a submarine's steel hull. It was a complete reimagining of anti-submarine warfare, a single vehicle that could search and strike without ever needing a runway or an aircraft carrier. But the machine's ambition was its undoing. The engineering challenges were Herculean. The complex system of inflatable pontoons was a constant source of trouble, and the propulsion system, a combination of lift jets and cruise engines, never quite achieved the harmonious integration needed for true high-altitude flight. With the death of Robert Bartini, the project lost its visionary driving force and its intellectual heart. Development stalled, and the single, haunting prototype never achieved its full, terrifying potential. Today, it sits decaying in a Russian museum, a rusting skeleton of wings and strange, empty pontoons. It is a ghost of a future that demanded too much from the materials and the moment, a machine that tried to conquer three worlds at once and ended up a permanent resident of a fourth, the world of forgotten dreams. What does such a monumental failure teach us? That the boundaries we draw between sea, sky, and land are perhaps more flexible than we think, waiting only for a mind bold enough to erase them completely. A sleek silver monoplane soared over the French countryside, its wings rippling as if alive. This was the Gerin Varivol, a machine from the 1930s with a secret weapon hidden in its very structure. Its wings were not solid but composed of multiple overlapping slats, a design reminiscent of a giant Venetian blind laid flat. With a clever mechanical system, the pilot could command these slats to extend, dramatically increasing the wing's surface area for a slow, gentle takeoff. Once airborne and climbing, the slats could then be retracted, pulling the wing into a narrower, more streamlined shape perfect for slicing through the air at high speed. It was a single aircraft that could transform itself to be perfectly optimized for every phase of flight. René Gerin's invention was not just a paper concept, it flew, and it flew well, proving that a shape-shifting wing was not only possible but practical. So why do our airplanes today have rigid, fixed wings? The answer lies in the brutal economics of engineering. The mechanical system to move all those slats was incredibly complex, a labyrinth of tracks, actuators, and linkages that added significant weight and countless potential points of failure. At the same time, conventional aircraft designers were making huge strides with a simpler solution, adding flaps and slats to the leading and trailing edges of standard wings. These devices could alter the wing's properties enough to improve low-speed lift without requiring the entire wing to physically grow and shrink. It was a classic case of a good enough solution beating a brilliant but complicated one. The Varivol was relegated to a museum, a beautiful dead end in aviation history. Yet its ghost lingers in the most advanced aircraft we have today. Modern fighter jets use swing wings, a crude form of variable geometry compared to the Varivol's elegant, continuous transformation. What if that French innovation had been refined? Would our passenger jets today have wings that breathe, expanding at the airport gate to make boarding easier, then contracting to a slender dart for the journey itself? This forgotten prototype challenges our very definition of an airplane, suggesting that the most efficient machine may not have a single, perfect shape, but many. A conventional cargo plane should not be able to hang motionless in the air, yet that is precisely what the Dornier Do 31 did. In the tense climate of the Cold War, West Germany engineered the world's only vertical takeoff and landing jet transport, a machine that blended the mundane profile of a military hauler with the impossible grace of a hummingbird. It looked like any other twin-engine transport until you noticed the strange pods at its wingtips and the massive swiveling engines under each wing. For vertical ascent, those main engines would pivot straight down, while a battery of additional lift jets inside the wingtip pods would ignite, blasting the entire aircraft skyward on a column of fire. The vision was tactical genius, a flying truck that could deliver supplies or evacuate wounded directly to a forest clearing or a shattered city street, completely independent of vulnerable runways. This was not a small demonstrator, it was a full-scale, functional aircraft, and it proved its capabilities in a series of breathtaking flights. It would rise vertically, hang in a stable hover, and then seamlessly transition into forward flight, its wingtip jets shutting down as it accelerated into a conventional cruise. So why did this flying marvel never enter service? The sheer cost of its complexity became its anchor. The system of 10 separate engines, 8 for lift and 2 for cruise, was a maintenance nightmare and consumed fuel at a prodigious rate. The deafening roar of all those jets firing at once was environmentally and logistically untenable. More importantly, the military strategy that demanded such a specialized vehicle began to shift. NATO doctrine moved away from the idea of forward basing that the Do 31 was designed to support, leaving this brilliant solution without a pressing problem to solve. The project was cancelled and the prototypes were retired to museums. For decades, the Do 31 stood as a lonely monument to an abandoned path, a proof that we once knew how to make large aircraft defy gravity on command. Its legacy, however, is far from over. Today, as a new wave of electric vertical takeoff and landing companies designs air taxis and cargo drones, they are walking a path that the Dornier Do 31 blazed over half a century ago. It makes you wonder how much further we might already be if that German jet transport had not been a dream abandoned, but a foundation built upon. While the Do 31 thundered into the sky on pillars of fire, another propulsion system promised a journey of absolute silence. In the 1970s, long before solar panels adorned every rooftop, scientists at NASA and beyond were sketching out spacecraft that would sail the void not on rocket exhaust, but on sunlight itself. Their most elegant vision was the lenticular solar sailor, a concept as beautiful as it was ambitious. Picture a vast, rigid disk, miles wide and thinner than a human hair, its surface a perfect mirror. This would be its engine. The principle relies on a gentle, unceasing force, the physical pressure of light. Though a single photon is unimaginably tiny, the constant stream from the sun, bouncing off that mirrored sail, would impart a tiny, continuous push. There is no explosion, no roar, just the silent accumulation of velocity over days, weeks, and years. Unlike a chemical rocket that burns through its fuel in a frantic, minutes-long sprint, a solar sail never runs out of propellant. It could theoretically cruise the inner solar system forever, a ghost ship riding the solar wind. So why did we not build these majestic light-driven vessels? The challenge was one of scale and delicacy. Deploying a structure that large and that fragile from a tiny payload fairing was a problem that defied the engineering of the era. Imagine trying to unfurl a sheet of gossamer the size of a city in zero gravity without it tearing, tangling, or drifting away. The material science simply was not there. The concept was shelved, a dream too perfect for its time, yet its legacy is a profound one. This forgotten vision represents the purest form of travel, a method that harmonizes with the universe rather than fighting against it. It asks a humbling question: have we been approaching space travel all wrong, with brute force instead of patient, graceful intelligence? The same mind that dared to make a helicopter's wings spin like a top also looked at a railway and asked why it needed two rails. Louis Brennan, undeterred by the fate of his gyropter, turned his genius to the problem of ground transport, emerging with the Brennan Monorail. His solution was as elegant as it was bizarre: a single passenger car balanced precariously, impossibly, on a single rail. The secret was not in the track, but in the hidden heart of the car itself: two powerful, spinning gyroscopes mounted inside. You have felt the basic principle if you have ever held a spinning bicycle wheel and tried to tilt it, feeling it stubbornly resist and push in an unexpected direction. This is precession, the gyroscopic force that Brennan harnessed. His system was constantly vigilant, its gyros sensing the faintest hint of a lean. The instant the car began to tip, the gyroscopes would precess, automatically applying a corrective force that pushed it back to a perfect, upright balance. It was not just stable, it was actively stable, a machine that could constantly catch itself from falling. The implications were staggering. A monorail requires a fraction of the material and land of a conventional double-track railway. A cheaper, simpler ribbon of steel that could be elevated above city streets or laid through difficult terrain with ease. And Brennan did not just theorize, he built a full-scale, working prototype. In a dramatic 1910 demonstration for the British War Office, he had artillery shells fired at the track right in front of the moving car. The shell took out a section of the single rail, and the Brennan Monorail, its gyros whirring, simply coasted over the gap without a wobble, maintaining its perfect equilibrium where any two-railed train would have derailed instantly. It was a triumph, yet this revolutionary system never left the test track. The very technology that made it work also doomed it. To investors and railway barons, the gyroscopes were magical, incomprehensible black boxes. What if they failed? The complex proprietary mechanism seemed like a maintenance nightmare compared to the brute, understood simplicity of two heavy rails and a wide wheelbase. At that very moment, the world was standardizing on double-track gauges, locking in a century of infrastructure that would make any alternative seem frivolously complex. The Brennan Monorail was not a failure of engineering, but a victim of inertia, both physical and economic. It forces a profound question about the paths we choose. Our world is built on the principle of passive stability, on wide bases and twin supports. Brennan offered us a world of active stability, of dynamic balance, where a single point of contact could be enough if you had the intelligence to maintain it. What if we had embraced that more delicate, more intelligent path? Our city skylines might now be traced with slender, single rails, carrying silent trains that glide above the traffic, their hidden hearts spinning, forever keeping them upright. Its colossal shadow fell across the airfield like a mechanical thundercloud. The Hughes XH-17 flying crane was not a helicopter in any conventional sense. It was a flying factory floor, a leviathan built around the largest rotor system ever to beat the air. With a two-bladed rotor spanning 130 feet from tip to tip, the entire machine was an exercise in staggering scale. But its true genius and its fatal flaw was hidden in the very ends of those massive blades. The XH-17 had no traditional engine, no complex transmission linking power from the fuselage to the rotor hub. Instead, it employed a radical tip jet system. Compressed air was piped through the hollow rotor blades, mixing with fuel and igniting in a continuous, fiery blast right at the tips. Think of it not as a rotor spinning, but as a pair of immense rocket engines whirling in a circle. This brute force approach had a brilliant side effect. It eliminated the need for a tail rotor. With no engine torque to fight, there was no need for a counteracting thrust from the tail. The entire machine was a single, unified lifting force. Its purpose was as straightforward as its design was complex: to be a flying crane capable of hoisting 10 tons of cargo and transporting it to places no truck or traditional aircraft could reach. And it worked. The monstrous helicopter did fly, proving that the fundamental concept was sound. Yet its flights were short, earth-shaking events. The tip jet system was catastrophically inefficient, gulping down fuel at a rate that made any practical mission financially absurd. The noise was beyond description, a continuous, deafening roar of twin jet engines spinning at the end of a 130-foot circle. After a brief and thunderous test program, the project was cancelled. The single prototype was eventually scrapped, leaving behind only photographs and a legacy of pure, unadulterated ambition. The XH-17 stands as a monument to a certain kind of engineering philosophy, where a problem is not so much solved as it is overwhelmed by sheer force. It forces a difficult question: where is the line between visionary ambition and practical folly? Sometimes, the most unforgettable machines are not those that succeed, but those that demonstrate the outer limits of what is physically possible, even if that limit is a wall of flame and sound. This fiery whirlwind was one answer to heavy lifting, but another forgotten design sought to achieve a similar goal with ghostly silence, using not burning fuel, but the subtle push of microwaves beamed from the ground. A ship with no sails once crossed the ocean, driven forward by a pair of giant, spinning smokestacks. This was the Buckow, Anton Flettner's radical rotor ship, a machine that harnessed a force most of us have seen in a childhood game. When a soccer player kicks a ball with a certain spin, it curves in a surprising arc through the air. This is the Magnus effect, the same principle that powered Flettner's vessel. His rotors were not propellers, but massive, smooth cylinders mounted vertically on the deck. As motors set them spinning, the passing wind would interact with the rotating surface. On one side, the rotor was spinning in the same direction as the airflow, accelerating it and creating a zone of low pressure. On the opposite side, it was spinning against the wind, slowing the air and creating an area of higher pressure. The ship was literally sucked forward by this pressure difference, gliding across the water with a quiet, relentless efficiency that astonished onlookers. The Buckow and its successor, the Barbara, were not mere experiments. They were working cargo ships that proved their worth, crossing the Atlantic and demonstrating they could match the speed of conventional vessels while using a fraction of the fuel. For a moment, it seemed the age of wind power had returned, reborn with a mechanical twist. But the moment was brutally short. The Great Depression shattered global trade, and the discovery of vast, cheap oil reserves made fossil fuel the undisputed king of propulsion. The elegant complexity of spinning rotors could not compete with the simple, powerful burn of diesel. The rotor ships were scrapped, and Flettner's vision was shelved as a charming historical oddity. Yet, a century later, his forgotten prototype is experiencing a quiet renaissance. In an era desperate to cut carbon emissions, modern cargo ships are now being fitted with towering Flettner rotors once again. These are not replacements for engines, but supplements, their silent spin reducing fuel consumption by a significant percentage on long ocean voyages. The rotor ship was not a failure. It was a seed planted in soil that was not yet ready to receive it. Its story whispers a crucial lesson about our relationship with innovation. A brilliant idea does not disappear just because the world ignores it. Sometimes it simply waits for our needs to finally align with its quiet, efficient logic. Silent and sleek, the Hyper-Roman 3 looked less like a spacecraft and more like a blade meant to slice through the upper atmosphere. In 1969, as the Apollo program was landing men on the moon, NASA's Langley Research Center was already dreaming of the next giant leap, a practical, reusable spaceplane. The Hyper-Roman 3 was their audacious answer, a full-scale lifting body so radical it was almost all fuselage. Its design was a study in minimalist genius, a long, slender, flat-topped body with only the faintest suggestion of wings, a shape optimized for one thing: slipping through the thin air at hypersonic speeds with serene stability. To test it, engineers did something brilliantly simple. They attached the Hyper-Roman 3 to the underbelly of a Navy helicopter, carried it to an altitude of 10,000 feet over a dry lake bed, and released it. With no pilot and no engine, the remote-controlled craft became a silent, unpowered dart. It swept into a graceful, controlled glide, descending at a perfect angle and demonstrating the exact stable re-entry profile the engineers had hoped for. That single, successful flight proved the concept was sound, that this elegant knife edge of a vehicle could reliably return from space, yet that was its first and last flight. The Hyper-Roman 3 program was abruptly cancelled. NASA's overarching vision was consolidating around the space shuttle, a vehicle that chose a different path, blending a winged orbiter with a massive fuel tank and solid rocket boosters. The shuttle was a magnificent machine, but it was also a complex compromise. The Hyper-Roman 3, by contrast, represented a purer, simpler philosophy of spaceflight. Its large, flat underside was inherently better at radiating the intense heat of re-entry, potentially reducing the need for complex thermal tiles. Its minimalist form meant less weight, less complexity, and potentially greater robustness. We are left to wonder if the path to reusable spacecraft was needlessly complicated by abandoning this sleek, single-body approach. Decades later, the ghost of the Hyper-Roman 3 is visible in the stark, cylindrical silhouette of the SpaceX Starship, another vehicle that trusts its entire body to generate lift and survive re-entry. It forces a humbling question. Did we spend 50 years engineering intricate solutions to problems a simpler shape from our own past had already solved? An aircraft could slow to a near standstill in mid-air, clinging to the sky on the roar of its own propellers. This was the magic of the Custer Channel wing, a machine that looked as if someone had cut giant semicircular bites out of its wings and mounted an engine in each one. The principle was a masterpiece of focused energy. At high power, those propellers did not just push the plane forward, they pulled a massive stream of air through the curved channels built into the wings. This accelerated airflow over the wing surface created a tremendous low-pressure area, essentially sucking the entire aircraft upward with a force far greater than a conventional wing could manage at the same slow speed. The Custer could achieve lift at velocities so low it appeared to be hovering, a fixed-wing aircraft performing tricks that seemed to belong to a helicopter. It demonstrated astonishing short takeoff and landing performance, leaping into the air or settling gently onto a patch of ground not much larger than its own wingspan. For pilots operating in the remote wilderness where a cleared airstrip is a luxury, this capability was the holy grail. So why did this brilliant solution to slow flight never enter widespread production? The very design that gave it such remarkable lift also gave it unusual and demanding handling qualities. Pilots had to adapt to a machine that responded differently to control inputs, especially during the critical transition between low-speed lift and forward flight. At the same time, the helicopter was maturing rapidly, offering true vertical takeoff and landing without any forward speed required. For military and industrial buyers, the helicopter presented a more versatile, if more complex, solution. The Custer Channel Wing was left as a spectacular demonstration of what could be achieved with a clever manipulation of aerodynamics, a niche concept without a mass market to sustain it. Its legacy is a poignant one, a reminder that a successful prototype does not always find a world ready to accept it. What if our vision for utility aviation had been broader, embracing specialized designs for specific environments? The Custer sits in a hangar of history, a quiet testament to the untapped potential of flying from any field, any riverbank, any forgotten road. While the world marveled at Japan's bullet train and France's TGV, a completely different kind of high-speed rail was thundering across the Soviet steppe. The ER-22 was not a sleek electric serpent gliding on overhead wires, but a brute force machine powered by the beating heart of a jet. Its nose cone and engine configuration gave it the distinct look of a land-bound airliner, a promise of sky speed delivered on steel rails. The genius of its design lay in its pragmatic ambition. The vast Soviet Union had thousands of miles of non-electrified track, and rewiring the entire continent was an impossibly expensive task. The ER-22 offered a brilliant shortcut, using gas turbine engines to generate immense power without needing a single new power line. These were the same engines that propelled military aircraft, scaled down and repurposed to spin the train's wheels through a complex hydraulic system. It was a roaring, mechanical declaration that the future of rail did not have to be electric. For a glorious moment, it worked. The ER-22 shattered the Soviet rail speed record, hitting 120 miles per hour, a blur of dust and noise proving that jet power could indeed conquer the rails. Then the global landscape shifted violently. The oil crisis of 1973 sent fuel prices skyrocketing, and the ER-22's greatest strength became its fatal flaw. Gas turbines are notoriously thirsty, and the train's appetite for expensive fuel made every record-breaking run a financial disaster. In an economy suddenly gripped by fuel scarcity, the dream of a turbine-powered train network evaporated almost overnight. The project was shelved, the prototypes were retired, and the Soviet Union, like the rest of the world, turned to the more predictable economics of electric traction. The ER-22 now sits as a ghost in the machine of transportation history, a poignant reminder that a technology can be perfectly sound and yet perfectly wrong for its moment in time. What if the world's oil had remained cheap? Would our cross-country journeys today be accompanied by the whine of a turbine instead of the hum of an electric motor? This forgotten Soviet experiment forces us to ask whether our technological choices are driven by true superiority or simply by the volatile tides of global economics. Sometimes the best idea is the one that can afford to survive. A ghost of streamlined aluminum still hangs silently over a Scottish field. George Bennie's Railplane was not a sketch or a model. It was a fully realized machine, a passenger car suspended from an overhead monorail that looked like a wingless aircraft frozen in mid-flight. Its propulsion came not from spinning wheels on a track, but from twin air screws mounted at the rear, two giant propellers that would pull the carriage along its elevated guideway with a smooth, electric whir. The genius of Bennie's vision was in its elegant separation. He saw the railways of the 1930s as a tangled mess, where fast passenger expresses were constantly delayed by slow, plodding freight trains sharing the same tracks. His railplane solved this by creating a new skyway, a dedicated highway for people that floated above the freight lines below. Imagine a world where your high-speed commute never once stopped for a coal train. The short test track proved it worked. The carriage moved with a quiet grace that felt more like gliding than rolling, a whisper of future motion. Bennie dreamed of these silent, propeller-driven capsules linking every major city in Britain, a network of aerial trains that would make traditional rail seem like a relic of the steam age. Then the Great Depression tightened its grip, the funding vanished, the visionary investors retreated, and Bennie's company collapsed into bankruptcy. The single, beautiful prototype was left to rust, its metal eventually sold for scrap during the Second World War. Its demise poses a haunting question. Was this idea simply a victim of bad timing, or was its very elegance its undoing? The world was not yet ready to build an entirely new, parallel infrastructure just for speed. We chose instead to make the old ground-level railways faster, a compromise we still live with today. What if Bennie's silent sky train had been the foundation of our transit systems? Our city skylines might be defined not by the roar of freeways, but by the gentle hum of propellers tracing graceful lines between the buildings, a forgotten future where we truly left the traffic behind. Its wings swept forward in a defiant arc, a silhouette that seemed to defy the very textbooks of flight. The NASA and Grumman X-29 was not just another experimental jet. It was a flying paradox, an aircraft that was deliberately built to be unstable. In the 1980s, while most designers sought predictable, steady handling, the X-29 embraced chaos, using a revolutionary digital fly-by-wire system to make instability its greatest strength. Those forward-swept wings were the key to its radical performance. This configuration reduced drag dramatically and provided astonishing agility, allowing for tighter turns and sharper maneuvers than any conventional fighter. But the true genius of the X-29 was not merely in its wings, but in its holistic philosophy of propulsion. The airframe and its single powerful engine were not separate components bolted together. They were conceived as a single, cohesive system. Every curve of its body, every contour of its fuselage was shaped to work in perfect harmony with the engine's intake and exhaust flows, optimizing the entire vehicle for peak efficiency and thrust. This was propulsion reimagined, not as a mere engine, but as an integrated dance between power and form. Of course, a plane this naturally unruly would be impossible for a human to fly. Its constant tendency to pitch upwards made it inherently uncontrollable without intervention. This is where its computer brain came in, making tiny control adjustments hundreds of times a second, constantly catching the aircraft from its own instincts to tumble. The X-29 was a testament to a new partnership where human pilots provided the intent and silicon nerves provided the flawless execution. No production aircraft ever directly copied its striking silhouette, but its legacy is woven into the fabric of modern aviation. The lessons learned from taming this unstable beast directly paved the way for the ultra-agile fighters that followed, and are the bedrock of every nimble, acrobatic drone that fills our skies today. The X-29 was a crucial stepping stone, proving that the highest performance often lies just on the other side of instability, waiting for a smart enough system to harness it. A clear pattern has woven itself through these tales of forgotten genius. The failure of these 28 marvels was rarely a simple story of a bad idea. More often, it was a tragic collision between brilliant innovation and unyielding external forces. The relentless math of economics strangled countless dreams as funding vanished during a depression or a cheaper, simpler alternative won the day. The grand chessboard of global strategy shifted, rendering a specialized military vehicle instantly obsolete. The science of materials hit a wall, leaving engineers with a perfect design and no way to build it without it melting or shattering. In so many cases, a revolutionary concept was simply overtaken by a competing technology that was good enough, easier to manufacture, and more readily understood. These prototypes were often victims of the calendar, born during a world war or an economic collapse when the resources for nurturing such delicate futures simply did not exist. And many were just too far ahead, their full potential locked away, waiting for the invention of microchips, advanced composites, or powerful batteries that would not arrive for another half-century. This reveals a profound truth about our world. Technological progress is not a straight, predestined highway. It is a sprawling, branching tree. For every branch that grows into the trunk of our modern reality, countless others are pruned away by the shears of circumstance, cost, and contingency. We live in the world built by the branches that survived, but we are left to forever wonder about the lush, alternate technological canopy that might have grown, a skyline of silent aircraft, eternal engines, and personal flight, all lost to the quiet storms of history. Our journey through the Museum of Forgotten Propulsion is complete, yet the ghosts of these machines remain. From the silent promise of nuclear cars to the soldier standing on a rising platform, from the sea-skimming ekranoplan to the train balanced on a single rail by spinning gyroscopes, these 28 prototypes form a hidden treasury of human imagination. They are monuments to a fundamental truth that the path of progress is not a straight line but a wilderness of branching possibilities. For every technology that defines our world, countless others were left by the roadside, not always because they were worse, but because of a cruel twist of timing, a shift in funding, or the rise of a simpler alternative. These forgotten ideas are far more than footnotes in an engineering textbook. They are vital sources of inspiration, cautionary tales about complexity, and sometimes dormant blueprints waiting for the right moment to be unearthed. The next great leap in how we move through our world might not require a completely new discovery. It could be hidden in the elegant lines of the Hyper-Roman III lifting body, or in the silent, fuel-sipping logic of the Aereon Dynairship. Perhaps the key to our future lies in courageously re-examining the audacious dreams of our past. Let these stories of what almost was fuel your own curiosity. Which of these forgotten ideas do you believe truly deserves a second chance? Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more journeys into the fascinating corners of technological history.